real conversations. This is Real Talk with RAFF.
Hello, I'm Susan RAFF, and welcome to Real Talk. Today we are going to talk about something that Connecticut lost recently, and that is the passing of former Governor Jodi Rell. Jodi Rell was the 87th governor in Connecticut. She was very well liked and respected. There are many events planned for next week as her body is brought back to Connecticut. But we wanted to share some insight about the former governor and the impact that she had on our state. And joining us here on Real Talk is Chris Cooper, who was Rell's former communications director.
Thanks, Susan.
Thank you. First and foremost, I think that it was quite a surprise. She was 78, but I understand she passed away from a brief illness. But it was very sudden, and it really took people by surprise, right?
I think so. Everything that we had heard is that she was enjoying herself in Florida and spending a lot of time with her family when she was up north. Didn't really hear of any lead up to what was involved in her passing. So yes, I would say it was surprising for most people.
And I think what's interesting in all the people that we've spoken to over the past few weeks or a few days about Jodi Rell, I wouldn't say she was someone who was in politics for quite a long time. I mean, she was a state representative, she was a lieutenant governor, but she wasn't really the politician that many people have grown maybe not to like. She was someone who could really bridge the gap. Why do you think that is? I mean, when you served with her, what was it about her that made her so likable?
Well, I think for one thing, she was just a terrific human being. She really, what you saw with her was really what you got. And I don't think she ever allowed the trappings of the office to move her away from being that kind of a human being.
I think she also reluctantly became governor, right? So she was lieutenant governor, picked by former Governor John Rowland to be his lieutenant governor. And then when things started to get ugly for him and facing impeachment, he resigned. She finished his term, but she did run on her own and won. And many say it was really what Connecticut needed at that time to kind of bring back some decency to that office.
I think it's true. I think during that time, many voters and many people in Connecticut had rightfully lost faith in their government. Governor Rowland had been indicted and was facing impeachment, and as we know, resigned in July of that year. When Jodi took over, she immediately took steps to restore the public trust and confidence. She signed Executive Order Number 1, which ushered in a series of ethics reforms and safeguards that would make sure that those kind of contracting and other issues would not be possible going forward. I think one of the leading papers referred to her as a breath of fresh air, and I think people saw her that way.
I'm going to try to refresh my memory. Was Rochelle Rubin the ethics czar? Was that part of her administration?
That's right.
Right, to bring back not just stability, but confidence in the state. I mean, I think former Governor Rowland really kind of damaged people's trust in politics and ethics, and I think Rell took that very seriously.
She did. And Governor Rowland did do a lot of good as well. She did champion the UConn 2000 program, which really transformed that campus. And then when Governor Rell took over, she proposed and got adopted a very similar program for the state university system.
She also signed the Civil Rights or the Civil Unions
Yes.
bill, which, as some LGBTQ advocates remember at the time, she wasn't forced to do that. She did that on her own. I think she was also pro-choice, if my memory. Was she a different kind of Republican, do you think?
Well, I think the politics weren't as important to her as the policies. She stood for the civil unions, I believe out of a deep sense that it was the right thing to do. And I think that is probably what was her guideline on virtually any issue? Is this going to be good for Connecticut? Is it the right thing to do?
Interesting in a time where things have really changed. I remember also that she did not really want to live at the residence. She lived mostly in Brookfield. That was her hometown. And I don't know if she caught flack for that, but she didn't really want to stay at the residence that much. She wasn't into that.
She always loved being in Brookfield. That was her kind of her touchstone, her home base. She was at the residence when she had to be, and meetings took place there. But yeah, I think she enjoyed being in her hometown.
It's interesting, I've had a chance over the past few days to speak to some Republicans, who were in office at the time, and felt that she really could, they may not have agreed with her on all things, and they had their differences, but they could work with her and respected her. We're not seeing so much of that in today's world.
I agree. I think the harshest thing that any of her opponents said about her during the legislative process is Speaker Amon used to refer to her as Snow White. That was kind of a dig a little bit, but certainly that's not the worst thing that somebody could be called.
No, not in today's world, no. But, and she was also, a family person, right? Her husband, Lou Rell, who I got to know actually at some of the governor's holiday parties. He wasn't really comfortable with the, political spotlight either. And I remember having conversations with him about his flying planes. He was in the military, and she was also, as of late, a very proud grandmother. Yeah, she was very proud of that. But she meant a lot to this state, and in somewhat, we may not see that again. I'm not sure.
It's hard to say. Governor Lamont's been very popular. I don't know that, as you say, when the governor would do a public event, sometimes the one I'm thinking of is when it was sales tax-free day in Connecticut. She would go to West Farms Mall. She would go to a lot of different places. And I remember one time we had done 3 or 4 of those. And when we got to this one place, I don't remember the town now, but there didn't really have anybody that showed up for the little press avail. And so we had set the podium up, and we said, Governor, what do you want to do? It doesn't look as though we're going to get anybody here today. She said, well, there's a lot of shoppers inside the store. Let's go talk to them. So she went in and she chatted people up. How do you like tax-free week this week? And, people just, it was so different than a lot of governors. Roland was a very personable guy. But I think Governor Rell had a real down-to-earth feel about her that people could connect with.
Yeah, I saw her last year. She came to the state capitol I know she came for Lamont's holiday party, but the Capitol Press Corps, of which I'm a member of, she always has come, and she came last year up on the 4th floor of the state capitol. I remember we were all so happy to see her. She doesn't have to do that. She doesn't have to come up here. But I think she really likes it and made some good relationships with people over the years, and people appreciate that.
I agree.
You also served under Connecticut's first female governor, Ella Grasso, who was also revered and liked. How would you describe the two of them? Were they similar in some way?
Both were very bright people. I think Governor Rell had a little bit more sensitive touch with people than Governor Grasso. But again, it was a different time. The media wasn't as robust, I would say, covering the Capitol back in 1978. There was that famous photo.
I like that, not as robust. That's polite.
Yeah. But you remember that somebody had stamped in the snow, Ella help, with that huge blizzard of '78, and that kind of helped to cement her image as somebody who, again, especially because the last huge storm, the former governor had been away skiing while all of the problems were unfolding.
Yeah.
And Ella, by contrast, was very much hands-on, down at the Armory and being gubernatorial.
Why do you think Jodi Rell did not run for another term?
I don't know. I really don't. I would guess it was a personal decision. I think she had served 9 years as a lieutenant governor, and then another couple serving out Roland's term, 4 of her own. I think part of it would be that she probably felt she had accomplished a lot of what she had hoped to do. As I mentioned, she undertook that CSU program, which is similar to UConn 2000. She also was the first governor in many years to make significant investments in rail. It was proposed to shut down Shoreline East. Instead, she added cars. They also bought new cars for Metro North.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
I think they were used cars and somewhere, but they were refurbished.
That's right.
One of the things that I don't think a lot of people know, and you've served quite a few Republican governors, that you're a Democrat. And I think you mentioned to me that Roland knew that, Rell knew that.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't feel that was a bad thing. They felt it was a good thing. Why?
I think they both were people who were able to have a pretty big tent. I just remember, I'm not sure if this still goes on, I sure hope it does, but you know, at the end of every legislative session, when the session was gavelled to a close, the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate would come over to the governor's office and sit down and either have a glass of wine or just chat about, you know, how the session had gone. And I don't know if that still goes on. I sure hope it does.
Yeah, I think that's missing. I know for the first, 10 years or so, I remember when the session ended, and there was a lot more camaraderie. I think that at the end of the day, you know, even though Republicans and Democrats disagreed, I mean, Larry Cafaro didn't agree with John McKinney and Don Williams, but at the end of the day, they walked away as friends and could talk about things. You don't see that anymore. There's not that personal kind of connection anymore.
One of my favorite memories is at a time when the Speaker, Amon, and the governor were, you know, at odds politically, but I don't think necessarily personally. Speaker Amon had taken to calling her Snow White, and I always got a kick out of thinking if that's the worst you can say about her, I think she's doing okay.
What do you think we're going to see next week? I mean, in my time here in Connecticut, I've not seen a governor lie in state. I don't remember, you said Ella Grasso, so that's been a while because a lot of people today were not around when she was. Tell us what that is like and what people can expect next week.
Well, I think, you know, when the governor took over for John Rowland, she held a series of kind of open houses, the first one being at the Capitol, just an opportunity for whoever wanted to come and meet the governor. She then duplicated those at a variety of other towns and geographic locations of the state. So I think lying in state is sort of a way for people who may have at one point either said hello to her to now have a chance to say goodbye.
And I think you're going to see people from both sides of the aisle, not just you know, the general public, but also politicians because she really had a way. I think that House Speaker Matt Ritter said last week that at a time when we see such bombastic language, that she was really kind of the calm in a storm, and I think people respected that, and maybe even people who had not met her were familiar, right?
I agree. Yeah, she did have a very easy demeanor about her. It's not that she couldn't be tough, especially, you know, on policy and things that she stood firmly for. But as you say, at the end of the day, it's politics, it's government, and when Democrats and Republicans can't disagree, they can certainly do so civilly, and that's something that I think Connecticut has always enjoyed.
I think in some way, when she was considering running again, that some of the political infighting and she didn't like that. I think that that turned her off, and I don't know if that might have been a reason why she just decided she, as you said, she accomplished things, and it was time to step back and maybe have someone younger take over.
I agree with that. I think that's true.
Yeah.
I think she felt that she had accomplished a great deal in 6 years, finishing part of the Rowland agenda in terms of transportation and education and, as you mentioned, civil unions. Not that there wasn't more to be done, but if you remember, we were also in a really rough budget cycle. And I don't personally know what all of the decision-making criteria was, but I would guess that she felt that she had done a good job, and maybe it was somebody else's turn.
And then Malloy came after her,
Mm-hmm.
very different from Governor Rell. What happened to you at that point? You were with her, and then where did your career go?
I retired in June of her last year in office. And then I started my own consulting firm. But I pinch hit. I used to do her public events, so I would go on the road with her, and when she was going to, one town or another or a business, I would handle that kind of stuff, just because at that point when I left, they were not going to fill my position because we were in a really tough budget, and we had a very capable staff, so they just decided not to fill it. I don't know what that said about me. But yeah, I continued to pinch it where I could.
Yeah, I remember you had a pretty significant staff during her administration and Rowland's, and I remember you could just walk in there. Things are a little bit different now. And as we, go forward to next week, it's my understanding she'll lie in state from in the afternoon or 10 to 2, and then there will be a burial or a celebration, a Catholic Mass. And I would imagine quite a few people will come.
I would think so. I do.
And then it's my understanding, since her husband is a former veteran, she will be buried alongside him at the Veterans Cemetery in Middletown.
Mm-hmm.
He was really a great guy, and I know it was very difficult. He's been gone for at least 10 years now. It was very difficult for her because I know they were very close. Did you get to know him well?
I did. In fact, my wife and I went to a couple of plays with them, something called the Capitol Steps, which is a troupe that kind of parodies Washington. And again, if you worked with Governor Rell, you knew she was your friend in addition to your employer, and it was a great experience for me.
What are some of the things that she was very strong upon? You mentioned that she was strong fast in her convictions and what she felt needed to be accomplished.
Well, she was very steadfast in her commitment to education. As I mentioned, the CSU, the CSU program, which was a similar program to the UConn 2000, and which then became UConn 2010, I believe. And you mentioned civil unions and civil rights, very strong on that. She was a champion of transportation, as we mentioned, the Metro North Line, and it had been proposed to shut down Shoreline East. Instead, she refurbished that, and I think that's all been good for the commuter.
Do you think that, she felt that it was so important to restore confidence, especially with former Governor Rowland, who is still very much a part of Connecticut? I think I saw him at Joe Lieberman's funeral, and I would not doubt that he will be there next week. Very, very different. Did they remain friends?
I don't know how close they were, but when they did see each other, they were friendly for sure. I think one time maybe she took some heat from some circles, because when she ran into him, she said something like, "How are you, old friend?" And some people said, maybe she shouldn't have said that. But, they had 9 years together prior to her taking over, and you get to know people pretty good in that amount of time.
Right, and again, he was very likable, and still is, and people come to his aid and help him. He had such charisma and knew that 5th Congressional District probably better than anybody, right? And, it's a shame what happened, and I remember his resignation. But I remember when Rell took office, how important it was at that time, because people really wanted to believe that, not all politicians were bad.
Right.
And she did that.
She did do that, and it was primarily through force of her own personality and her own internal ethics type of thing, I think.
How would you like to remember Jodi Rell?
Just a super wonderful, kind person who I don't think would have sought the spotlight as much as she sought it, but when it was thrust upon her, she proved to be well up to the job, and she did a terrific job. I think she brought a sense of decency and ethics, and as I said earlier, a breath of fresh air. And I think it did restore people's confidence in government. I think the Executive Order number 1, which, as you said, created the ethics officer and the compliance mechanisms, people now had a way to say, it seems like they've got their ducks in a row here, and everything's in order, and people are now not taking stuff for free.
Which is a good thing.
Right.
Do you think that it's an end of an era? I mean, I think ethics are very, very important, and what she brought to the administration helped Connecticut not just move forward, but restore confidence. But she was able to work with people on both sides of the aisle, and that's something that we just have kind of lost in our world.
I agree. I think, as I said, I think Democrats and Republicans both tried to find common ground where they could. Just to go back to Governor Rowland, when you remember the Adrian's Landing plan, this was a Republican governor trying to do good things for a Democratic-led city, and he had to do some persuading. He had to ask certain legislators to back this plan, and many times that support would come with a request for something they wanted. So, it was a little bit of a tightrope that you had to walk, or he had to walk. But I think what I would say is that Governor Rell completed some of the better things about John Rowland's agenda, but took on many other things herself. Most notably, as I mentioned, the CSEU system and transit.
And the Rell Center at the University of Hartford.
Right.
Our current governor, Ned Lamont, really didn't know Jodi Rell as much when she was a legislator, but he did get to know her over the years, had some nice things to say about her. And in fact, I believe gave some money, I don't remember how much, to the Rell Center at the University of Hartford with ARPA money, because Jodi Rell believed in public service.
Right.
How important is that?
Well, I think we're seeing now more than ever how important it is. And I think some of the things that have happened probably did surprise her. I don't think that she would have approved of much of what has happened at various points in our more recent history.
And her son, Michael, also a public servant, was
right.
the mayor of Wethersfield for a long time. I've known him over the years. I know he is devastated by what's happened, and they are putting together a plan for next week, because I understand the family is responsible for that. But he also believes in, public service, and the Rell Center is kind of a nice legacy that she left behind.
For sure, yeah.
Do you think young people today do not appreciate or feel the sense of public service that perhaps she would have liked?
It's a hard question. I mean, I think if you look at some of the voting patterns and so forth, it might suggest that they're not as committed or find it to be of the same value as somebody like Governor Rell, who lived it for so many years as a state rep and as a lieutenant governor and then as a governor. And I think that's what happens when you have a divisive tone. And again, I think Connecticut was a place where not too much of that really existed. There could be disagreements, but I don't recall a whole lot of name calling.
No, very, very different. And you need the legislature. I think even Governor Lamont would admit that when he took office. Didn't realize that he needed, not, just because there were Democrats in the Senate and House didn't necessarily mean that he had them on board. So you have to earn that trust. You have to work with people in the legislature to encourage them to support your agenda.
Right. And despite the problems that Governor Rowland sort of imposed upon himself, you can't ignore how many good things he really did do. He and Speaker Ritter, the current Speaker's father, Tom Ritter, they spearheaded that UConn 2000 program. And that's a great example of the two parties working together to do something that, turns out to turn UConn into one of the premier universities in the country.
Right. We have about a minute left. And as we look forward to next week, when a lot of people descend upon the state capitol and really the opportunity for people to come and pay their respects, what do you want the takeaway to be as we go forward about Governor Rell, someone you got to know, someone you were friendly with?
I would say a terrific governor and an even better human being.
She really was.
She was.
I enjoyed covering her and talking to her. And I saw her last year. I'm glad that I did. I wish I could see her again. But I suspect I will see you at the state capitol next week.
You will.
All right. We want to thank you for joining us on Real Talk.
It's my pleasure, Susan.
All right.
Thank you anytime.
And we hope you enjoyed listening to Real Talk and learning about former Governor Jodi Rell, who really had a huge impact on Connecticut. A lot of people liked her at a time now where politics is so divisive. She really took it upon herself to try to restore people's trust, and I think she did that. So thank you again. We'll be back soon.